The territory of the Muisca spanned an area of around 25,000 square kilometers, territory roughly covering modern southern and northeastern Boyacá and southern Santander. At the time of the Spaniard invasion, the area had a large population, although the precise number of inhabitants is not known. Estimates vary from 500,000 to up to 3 million inhabitants. Their economy was based on agriculture, salt, mining, trading, metalworking, and manufacturing. Scholars agree that the group identified as Muisca migrated to the Altiplano Cundiboyacense in the formative era, so between 500 and 1000 BCE. Like the other formative era cultures of America, the Muiscas were transitioning between hunter-gatherers and becoming sedentary farmers. Around 1500 BCE, groups of agrarians with ceramic traditions came to the regions from the lowlands. They had permanent housing and stationary camps, and worked the salty water to extract salt. In Zipacon, there is evidence of agriculture and ceramics. The oldest settlements of the highlands dates to 12,270 BCE. Between 500 BCE and 800 BCE, a second wave of migrants came to the highlands. Their presence is identified by multicolored ceramics, housing, and farms. These groups were still in residence upon the arrival of the Spanish conquerors. They left abundant traces of their occupation that have been studied since the 16th century and allow scientists to reconstruct their way of life. It is possible that the Muisca integrated with more ancient inhabitants, but the Muisca were the ones who molded the cultural profile and the social and political organization. Their language, a dialect of Chibcha, was very similar to those people of the Sierra Nevada of Santa Marta and the Sierra Nevada del Cocuy, the Uwa. The Muisca people were organized in a confederation that was a loose union of states that each retained sovereignty. The confederation was not a kingdom, as there was no absolute monarch, nor was it an empire, because it did not dominate other ethnic groups of people. It is hard to compare the Muisca Confederation with other American civilizations, such as the Aztec or the Inca empires. The Muisca Confederation was one of the biggest and best organized confederations of tribes on the South American continent. Every tribe within the confederation was ruled by a chief or a cacique. Most of the tribes were part of the Muisca ethnic group, sharing the same language and culture, forming relations through trade. They united in the face of a common enemy. The army was the responsibility of the Zipa or Zaque. The army was made up of Hueches, the traditional ancient warriors of the Muisca. The Muisca Confederation existed as the union of two lesser confederations. The Southern Confederation, headed by the Zipa, had its capital in Bacata, now Bogota, and the Southern politely included the majority of the Muisca population and held greater economic power. The Northern Territory was ruled by the Zaque and had its capital in Hunza, known today as Tunja. Although both areas had common political relations and affinities and belonged to the same tribal nation, there were still rivalries between them. Among the territories, there were 4 chiefdoms: Bacata, Hunza, Duitama, and Sogamoso. The chiefdom was composed by localities. The tribes were divided into capitanias, or in other words, ruled by a captain. The status of captain was inherited by maternal lineage. The Muisca legislation was determined by long extant customs with the approval of the Zipa or Zaque. This kind of legislation was suitable to a confederation system, and it was a well-organized one. The natural resources could not be privatized. Woods, lakes, plateaus, rivers, and other natural resources were common goods. The Muisca had an economy and society considered to have been one of the most powerful of the American post-classic stage, mainly because of the precious resources of the area, gold and emeralds, for one. When the Spaniards arrived in the Muisca territory, they found a rich statum, with the Muisca Confederation controlling mining of the following products: emeralds. Colombia is the primary producer of emeralds in the entire world. Copper, coal. The coal mines still operate today at Zipaquira and other sites. Colombia has some of the world's most significant coal reserves. Salt. There were mines in production at Nemocon, Zipaquira, and Tausa. Gold. Gold was imported from other regions, but it was so abundant that it became a preferred material for Muisca handicrafts. The many handicraft works in gold and the Zipa tradition of offering gold to the goddess Guatavita contributed to the legend of El Dorado. The Muisca traded their goods at local and regional markets with a system of barter. Items traded ranged from those of basic necessity through to luxurious goods. The abundance of salt, emeralds, and coal brought these commodities to de facto currency status. Having developed an agrarian society, the people used terrace farming and irrigation in the highlands. Main products were fruits, coca, quinoa, vuca, and potatoes. Another major economic activity was weaving. The people made a wide variety of complex textiles. The scholar Paul Bond said the Andean cultures mastered almost every method of textile weaving or decoration now known, and their products were often finer than those of today. The contributions of the Muisca culture to the Colombian national identity have been many. The Muisca culture had certain sports which were part of their rituals. The Tormeque game, also known as Tejo, has survived and became a popular sport of Colombia. Also important were matches of wrestling. The winner received a finely woven cotton blanket from the chief and was qualified as a Guecha warrior. Muisca priests were educated from childhood and led the main religious ceremonies. Only the priests could enter the temples. Besides the religious activities, the priests had much influence in the lives of the people, giving counsels in matters of farming or war. The religion originally included human sacrifice, but the practice may have been extinct by the time of the Spanish conquest, as there are no first-hand Spanish accounts. Oral traditions suggest that every family gave up a child for sacrifice, that the children were regarded as sacred and cared for until the age of 15, when their lives were then offered to the sun god Sui. Sui, Swa, Suhe, or Shui, meaning the sun god. He is the father of the Muisca. His temple was in Swamosh, the sacred city of the sun. He was the most venerated god, especially by the Confederation of the Zaque, who was considered his descendant. Chia, the moon goddess. Her temple was in what is today the municipality of Chia. She was widely worshipped by the Confederation of the Zipa, who was considered her son. Bochica. Though not properly a god, he enjoyed the same status as one. He was a chief or hero eternized in the oral tradition. The land was flooded by Huitaca, a beautiful and mean woman, or by Chipchacum, protector of the farmers. Bochica listened to the complaints of the Muisca about floods. With his stick, he broke two rocks at the edge of the Tequendama Falls. and all the water came out, forming a waterfall. Bochica punished Huitaca and Chipchacum and made Huitaca an owl and made her hold up the sky. Chipchacum was tasked with holding up the earth. Bachuay, the mother of the Muisca people. It was said that a beautiful woman with a baby came out of Lake Iguaque. Bachuay sat down at the bank of the lake and waited for the child to grow up. When he was old enough, they married and had many children, who were the Muisca. Bachuay taught them to hunt, to farm, to respect the laws, and to worship the gods. Bachuay was so good and loved that the Muisca referred to her as Furachoque, meaning good woman of Chipcha. When they became old, Bachuay and her husband decided to go back to the deep of the lagoon. That day the Muisca were so sad, but at the same time very happy because they knew their mother was very happy. Other versions of the legend say that after stepping into the lagoon of Iguaque, Bachuay ascended to the sky and became Chia. The cult of the Muisca centered on two main deities, Sway for the sun and Chia for the moon. They developed a vigesimal, based on 20, calendar and knew exactly the timing of the summer and solstice, June 21st, which they considered the day of Sway, the sun god. The Sway temple was in Sogamoso, the sacred city of the sun and the seat of the Iraka priest. The Muisca name of the city, Swamosh or Swamushi, means city of the sun. On the solstice, the Zake went to Shuamos for a major festival where ritual offerings were made. It was the only day of the year when the Zake showed his face, as he was considered a descendant of the sun god. The Muisca mythology is well documented. Many of the writers who contributed to the Chronicles of the West Indies were based in Bogota. They recorded many of the myths as they were interested in the traditions and cultures of the conquered people. The Muisca territory became the seat of the colonial administration for the new Kingdom of Granada. The origin of the legend of El Dorado in the early 16th century may be located in the Muisca Confederation. The Zipa offered gold and other treasures to the Guatavita goddess. To do so, the Zipa covered himself with gold dust and washed it off in the lake while tossing gold trinkets into the water. This tradition was well known outside of the Confederation as far as the Caribbean Sea. The Spaniards were attracted by stories of a city of gold that did not exist. Indigenous people sometimes got rid of the avaricious Spaniards in that way, pointing them in the direction of other peoples. Lake Guatavita was explored by conquistadors who were looking for gold offerings from the Zipa to the goddess. The legend grew until the term became a metaphor for any place where great wealth may be found or made. The Muisca did not construct large stone structures. They didn't use the abundant rock to leave monumental ruins, as has happened with other American cultures. Their houses were built with materials such as clay, canes, and wood. The houses had a conical form, most of them to the point that Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada, founder of Bogota, gave the area the name of Valle de los Alcazares, or Valley of the Palaces. The houses had small doors and windows, and the dwellings of the higher-ranking citizens were different. The Muisca used little furniture, as they would typically sit on the floor. Rivalries between the Zake and the Zipa were taken advantage of by the Spaniards, as they conquered the heart of what would be Colombia. Some of them, such as Sebastián de Belalcázar, Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada, and Nicolás de Federman, interested in locating El Dorado, discovered the rich plains of Cundinamarca and Boyacá. The presence of the Spaniards gave hope to both sovereigns that, were they to make one confederation, they could prevail in a war against the Spaniards. But the Spaniards ended up prevailing. The reaction of the chief leaders and the people did little to change the destiny of the confederations. The Spanish executed the last Muisca sovereigns, Sajipa and Aquiminzaque, in 1539 and 1540, respectively. In 1542, Gonzalo Suarez Rendon finally put down the last resistance, and the territories of the Confederation were shared by Belalcazar, Fetterman, and de Quesada. Later, the Spanish crown would elect de Quesada as the man in charge, with the title Adelantado de los Cabildos de Santa Fe y Tunja. When the Muisca structure disappeared under the Spanish conquest, the territory of the confederations of the Zaque and Zipa were included in a new political division within the Spanish colonies of America. The territory of the Muisca, located in a fertile plain of the Colombian Andes that contributed to make one of the most advanced South American civilizations, became part of the colonial region named Nuevo Reino de Granada. The priests and nobility of the Muisca were eliminated. Only the capitanías remained. Much information about the Muisca culture was gathered by the Spanish administration and by authors such as Pedro de Aguado and Lucas Fernández de Piedrahita. The Spaniards created indigenous areas to keep the survivors, who were obligated to work the land for them, in what were called encomiendas. The colonial era contributed to the importance of Bogota, and people from the area would play an important role in the fights for independence and republican consolidation. The wars of independence of three nations, Colombia with Panama, Venezuela, and Ecuador, were led by the descendants of the conquerors. Aboriginal, African, and mixed-race people were soldiers no less important a role. Studies of Muisca culture are abundant and have a long tradition. The first sources come from the Chronicles of the West Indies, which work lasted for 3 centuries during the existence of the colonial New Kingdom of Granada. After the independence wars of 1810, there was a surge of interest in the study of the Muisca culture. White Colombians established the capital of their republic in Bogota, the former viceroyal city, which was the capital of the Confederation of the Zipa, and was known as Bacata. Research shows that this site was the cradle of an advanced society whose process of consolidation was cut short by the Spanish conquest. This search for an identity resulted in giving emphasis to the Muisca culture and overlooking other native nations, which were seen as wild people. Researchers wrongly concluded that the Muisca culture inhabited a previously empty land and that all archaeological finds could be attributed solely to the Muisca. Miguel Triana, in his work in La Civilización Chibcha, suggested that the rock art symbols were writing. Wenceslao Cabrera Ortiz was the one who concluded that the Muisca were migrants to the highlands. In 1969, he published on this and reported about excavations at the El Abra archaeological site. Those publications opened a new era in the studies of the pre-Hispanic cultures in Colombia. Recent archaeological work has also concentrated on the creation and composition of Muisca goldwork, with this data being made available for wider research. Since 1989, there's been a process of reconstruction of the indigenous councils by the surviving members of the Muisca culture. They proposed linguistic and cultural recuperation, defense of the territories, nowadays occupied by others, and proposed urban and tourist plans. They support the communities of Ubate, Tosansipa, Soacha, Rakira, and Tenho in their efforts to recover their organizational and human rights. The community of Bosa made important achievements in its project of natural medicine in association with the Paul VI Hospital and the District Secretary of Health in Bogota. The community of Cota has reintroduced the growing of quinoa and regularly barter their products at market. In modern times, the population of the Muisca has drastically decreased. Although in the municipalities and districts of Cota, Chia, Tenjo, Suba, Engativa, Tosansipa, Gachansipa, and Ubate, descendants of the Muiscas are present. A census by the Ministry of Interior Affairs in 2005 provided a total of 14,051 Muisca people in Colombia. I hope you've enjoyed this short documentary about the Muisca people. If you did enjoy it and you're interested in this topic, I have another video that gives more information about the Muisca people, and that is the tour in history of Sogamoso, which is a separate video that you can find in the playlist that is linked in the description for this video. It's a playlist of all the videos I've made of the Department of Boyacá, a beautiful and to some underrated department in Colombia, which has lots of pretty little towns and amazing scenery. I went on a bunch of hikes and other adventures, and you can see all those videos in the playlist linked in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. In the description below this video, you can find two playlists. One of all the videos I've made in the underrated Colombian department of Boyacá, as well as another playlist of when I bicycled through Colombia a few years ago. That was part of a larger trip bicycling through Latin America, from Canada all the way down to Patagonia. I've also bicycled through Eastern Africa and Central and Eastern Europe, and I have playlists for all those countries that I've bicycled through available on this very same YouTube channel, Hum of the Earth. Alternatively, if you'd like to see an interactive map of everywhere that I went and everything that I got to see and do, I have that map available over my website, followthehumoftheearth.com. where you can click on the different locations and see the various blog posts and videos that I've made of those places. And if you'd like to follow my continuing adventures through Colombia's Boyacá department and beyond, you can do so by clicking on the red subscribe button and clicking on the bell to be notified when new videos come out. Alright, so that's going to do it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one.